American insistence on evacuation. So the U.S. insisted that Aguinaldo's Filipino forces evacuate strategic points around Manila Bay. So this was done to secure the area of American troops after their victory over sa mga Spaniards. So from the Americans' perspective, this was necessary to prevent further conflict and to establish control over the newly acquired territory. So, signing of the Treaty of Paris. So, the Treaty of Paris signed in 1898 officially ended the Spanish-American War and ceded the Philippines to the U.S. So, however, the Filipinos were not consulted during the negotiations, leading to resentment and a sense of betrayal. So they view the U.S. not as liberators but as a new colonizer. So the U.S. refused to recognize the first Philippines Republic established by Aguinaldo, further fueling Filipino anger. So dito mas lalong nagalit yung mga Pilipino. And so on February 4, 1899 incident, the shooting of Filipino soldier by an American sentry on February 4, 1899 was the spark that ignited the Filipino-American War. So may isang sundalong Amerikano na nabaril yung troops ng mga Pilipino at dahil doon nagkaroon sila ng hindi pagkakaunawaan. So doon na mismo nagsimula yung incident. So the simmering resentment and mistrust escalated into open conflict. American approach to Aguinaldo. So the U.S., specifically Commodore Dewey, did indeed seek out to Aguinaldo in Hong Kong and Singapore. So this was a strategic move to enlist the help of the Filipino revolutionary forces in their fight against Spain para mas umunlad yung kanilang forces. So while there might be debate about the specific of any promises made regarding Philippine independence, and it's undeniable that an informal alliance existed between Dewey and Aguinaldo. So, para mag-share sila ng common enemy. Actually na yung Spain and American was magkalaban din sila. So, this situation changed dramatically after the Spanish-American War. So the U.S., despite having initially encouraged Filipino resistance or in-encourage ang mga Pilipino na nakisama sa kanila. So, ultimately sought to establish their own control over the Philippines. So this shift in policy led to a breakdown in the informal alliance and triggered the Filipino-American War. The American authorities to treat Aguinaldo as an ally. So, shifting treatment of Aguinaldo, initially the U.S. sought out Aguinaldo's cooperation, seeing him as a valuable ally against Spain. So, however, after the surrender of the Manila, the U.S. treated him as a threat, or yung parang tingin nila kay Aguinaldo is panakot. So, effectively turning against their former ally. So, this change is evident in their secret agreement with Spain to surrender Manila without consulting Aguinaldo. So, effectively bypassing his authority, so the U.S. decision to treat Aguinaldo as an escaped convict and to not allowing him and his forces access to the surrendered city of Manila. So, was parang gusto nilang parang naisip nila na binitray sila ng mga Amerikano. So Aguinaldo had fought alongside U.S. forces against the Spanish, and the U.S. essentially chose to treat him as an enemy. So si Aguinaldo ay dahil nga sa nangyari naging tinreat niya yung mga U.S. na kalaban katulad ng sa Spain. So, this betrayal had dire consequences for the relationship between the U.S. and the Philippines. So, fueling Filipino resentment, the U.S. action deeply angered the Filipinos. So, yung mga sa ginawang action ng mga U.S. or dahil sa ginawa nila ay yung mga karamihan sa mga Pilipino ay nagkalit. At dahil doon, parang nagkaroon ng kaunting tuwan laban sa dalawang panig. So in December 1898, the Treaty of Paris was signed without even consulting the Filipino people in their representatives. So they signed a treaty with Spain. So the Treaty of Paris to take control of the Philippines. So yung problema dito is di not even ask the Filipinos what they wanted. So parang it was like they were just object, not people with their own wishes. So then the US President McKinley made a proclamation called benevolent assimilation. So sinabi niya na we are here to help you. We are your friends. So but the Filipinos or karamihan sa mga Pilipinos ay hindi naniwala sa kanya. So parang pagkakatingin nila sa sinabi na yun ni McKinley ay is a big lie para makontrol sila. So Filipinos were angry and they didn't trust the US at all. So they wanted their freedom or gusto nila ay ang kalayaan. So they were not going to let the US take it away from them. So hindi nila hinayaan na yung mga Amerikano na hayaan na kung sa kanila yung kalayaan nila. So dahil dito, this is what led to the Filipino-American War. So dahil doon na mismo nagkaroon ng Filipino-American War. So relax the tension. So Aguinaldo tried his best to relax the tension between Filipino and American. So despite these efforts, a series of incidents ultimately precipitated conflict. So the San Juan Bridge incident. So, on the San Juan Bridge incident, as a key turning point, General Arthur or MacArthur, a prominent American figure, objected to the presence of Filipino soldiers under Colonel Luciano San Miguel within his designated territory. So, this suggests a clash over control and territory. So, investigation and escalation. So, this passage indicates that Captain Fernando Gray, a Filipino officer, reported that the Americans initiate hostilities. So this suggests a difference in a perspective regarding who was responsible for escalating the situation. American victories. With swift strokes, the American army knifed through Pasig and other towns south of Manila. So this passage highlights the American army's rapid advance through the Philippines, specifically mentioning their swift capture of Pasig and other towns south of Manila. So this suggestion a decisive and effective military strategy employed by the Americans. So the drive to the north. So in late February and early March, American reinforcement arrived from the United States. So the arrival of American reinforcement in late February and early March indicating a strategic shift in the campaign. So the Americans were consolidating their gains and preparing for a larger offensive, likely targeting Manila and other areas further north. Capture of Emilio Aguinaldo on March 23, 1901 marked a significant turning point in the Philippine-American War, ultimately contributing to the end of major organized resistance against American forces. So, Aguinaldo's leadership in the war's background. Emilio Aguinaldo, a charismatic and influential leader, had spearheaded the Filipino resistance against Spanish colonial rule following the Spanish-American War and the U.S. acquisition of the Philippines. Aguinaldo continued his fight for independence, leading a guerrilla campaign against the American occupation. So the capture and its impact. So Aguinaldo's captured by American forces led by Colonel Frederick Funston was a strategic success for the Americans. Funston's daring plan involved a ruse in which American soldiers disguised themselves as Filipino prisoners of war and infiltrated Aguinaldo's camp in Palanan, Isabela. So the capture of Aguinaldo dealt a major blow to the Filipino resistance movement. His capture deprived the rebels of their most charismatic leader, causing many of his followers to lose hope and demoralizing the resistance. Used their victory to portray Aguinaldo as a defeat and isolated figure while presenting their own occupation as a necessary and benevolent act. So while Aguinaldo captured significantly weakened the organized resistance, so the Philippine-American War continued for several more years. Sporadic fighting and guerrilla attacks persisted until 1913. So Aguinaldo was eventually released in 1903 and worked to promote Filipino independence through a peaceful name. So the end of the war and American control officially ended on July 4, 1902 with the establishment of American control over the Philippines. So the capture of Aguinaldo, while not the sole factor, played a significant role in weakening the Filipino resistance and ultimately paving the way for American victory. And legacy and controversy. Aguinaldo captures remain a controversial event in Philippine history, while some view it as a decisive moment in the American conquest of the Philippines. Others argue that it was a symbol of the American disregard for Filipino aspiration for Independence Day. Emilio Aguinaldo is the leader of revolutionary. So Aguinaldo was a key leader in the struggle for Philippines independence from Spanish colonial rule, leading the revolutionary movement starting in 1896. After the Philippines was ceded to the United States, Aguinaldo declared independence and led the Philippine revolutionary government against the U.S. in a prolonged struggle. The Philippine-American War began in February 1899 with intense fighting across Luzon and nearby islands. The Filipinos, initially using traditional warfare methods, found themselves outmatched by the American superior firepower. By late 1899, they shifted to guerrilla tactics, aiming to wear down the American forces through hit-and-run attacks. This shift marked a turning point in the war as the Filipinos adapted to their disadvantage. Faced with superior American firepower, Filipino leader Emilio Aguinaldo shifted to guerrilla warfare in late 1899. These tactics involving hit-and-run attacks and ambushes prolonged the conflict. In response, the U.S. military employed harsh tactics to suppress the resistance. Emilio Aguinaldo, the leader of the Filipino resistance against American rule, was captured on March 23, 1901 in Palanan, Isabela. The capture was orchestrated by United States. General Frederick Funston, who employed a clever ruse. Funston's force included Filipino scouts known as the Macabebe Scout, who were disguised as insurgents, and they pretended to be bringing reinforcement to Aguinaldo camp, successfully gaining entry. This event marked on a major turning point in the Philippine-American War, significantly weakening the resistance and paving the way of the American victory. Emilio Aguinaldo, captured in March 1901, dealt a devastating blow to the Filipino forces fighting for Independence Day from the United States. So Aguinaldo was a revered figure, seen as the embodiment of the independence movement. With their leader gone, organized resistance quickly crumbled while some guerrilla groups continued to fight. The Philippine-American War officially ended on July 4, 1902, when the U.S. declared it over. However, sporadic fighting continued in remote areas for several years. Following the war, the U.S. established a civil government in the Philippines with William Howard Taft serving as the first civilian governor. So this marked the beginning of a period of American colonial rule which would last until 1946 when the Philippines finally gained the Independence Day. The Philippine-American War, while ending in 1902, left a lasting impact on the Philippines, and it ushered in a period of American colonial rule that profoundly shaped the national political, social, and economic landscape. Leaders like Aguinaldo became symbols of resistance and inspiration for future generations would ultimately achieve self-governance in 1946. The leader of the Filipino resistance in March 1901 marked a crucial turning point in the Philippines-American War. Aguinaldo captured a strategic point victory for the Americans that a major blow to Filipino morale and organization. Apolinario Mabini, the powerful president of the cabinet, held a significant influence over the President Aguinaldo. However, the United States, aiming to secure control over the Philippines, offered autonomy through the Truman Commission. Under this pressure, Aguinaldo decided to form a new cabinet led by Pedro Paterno. So, pinalitan niya si Apolinario Mabini at si Pedro Paterno ang ipinalit niya. So, a figure more willing to negotiate with the Americans despite his own convictions, Mabini accepted Aguinaldo's decision. So, wala siyang magawa kaya pumayag na lang siya sa desisyon ni Aguinaldo. So, acknowledging the political realities and the need for a more conciliatory approach, this event ultimately set the stage for the outbreak of the Philippines-American War. With Mabini's resignation, the executive arm of the government was reorganized into a 7 departments were created: Foreign Affairs, the First Communication and Public Treasury, Public Instruction, Interior, Agriculture, Industry and Commerce, and War and Navy. The new cabinet under Paterno was composed of Pedro Paterno, the President of Cabinet; Felipe Buencamino, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs; Severino de las Alas, the Secretary of the Interior; Mariano Trias, the Secretary of War and Navy; Hugo Ilagan, the Secretary of Treasury; Aguedo Velarde, the Secretary of Public Instruction; Maximo Molo, the Secretary of Communication and Public Works; Leon Maguerero, the Secretary of Industry and Agriculture and Commerce. So sila yung mga bagong members ng cabinet ni Aguinaldo na pinamumunuan ni Pedro Paterno. The assassination of Luna as the best prepared to fight the American enemy. So Antonio Luna was educated in Europe and studied a little of military science and tactics, but nature endowed him with an unruly temper that men fear and hate him. So si Luna ay masyado siyang bad temper. So karamihan sa mga Pilipino ay ayaw sa kanya. So early in June 1899, when Luna was at Bayambang, Pangasinan, preparing the defenses for the expected battle with the enemy. So he received a telegram asking him to nakareceive siya ng isang sulat na may nakalagay doon na gusto siyang makita. So, Aguinaldo at his headquarters in Cabanatuan. A Pasog Tirad was 4,500 feet height and commanded with a good view for miles around. So, at 10 o'clock on the night of December 1, 1899, Aguinaldo received the Pilar's report that the Americans had arrived at the town of Concepcion. So, in the morning of December 2, March proceeded with his men about 300 strong against Pasong Tirad. So, the Pilar's body was left by the roadside for 2 days until its order for some Igoros to cover it with dirt. So, noong December 2, March proceeded, natagpuan nila na yung body ni Del Pilar ay nakahandusay sa daan ng 2 araw. So, karamihan sa mga Igorot ay tinakpan na lang yung bangkay ni Del Pilar. With the Philippine Army bereft of its leader and symbol, many Filipino soldiers and officers found it convenient to surrender to the enemy. So karamihan sa mga Filipino Army na ay gusto nang sumuko sa United or sa Amerika. So while the American peace offensive were going on, Colonel Frederick Funston, stationed in Nueva Ecija, was planning the capture of Aguinaldo. So after days of hardship, Funston and his men pretending to be captives of the Macabebe scout arrived at Palanan on March 23. So through the thousands of Filipino soldiers surrendered as a result of the American peace propaganda and their brutal treatment of captured guerrillas. So some of military's commanders refused to lay down their arms. So in summer, General Vicente Lucban resorted to ambushing American soldiers and withdrawing after killing and wounding them. But the relentless campaign of the Americans led to the capture of Lucban on February 27, 1932. So that's all.